2 out of 400 times. That is the statistical measure of when you should chew tenants' heads off. So let me give you some actual context instead of a random answer, because it's obviously case by case dependent. I had a situation in which my property management assistant gave me a call and said, "Hey, this tenant is talking down to me. He's feeling entitled. What should I do about it? I've never addressed this sort of situation before." And she's kind of new to real estate, and that's understandable. And I'm glad that she even tried to deal with them for months on their own. But I just had to step in at that point, because anybody who talks down to my team needs to be eliminated as fast as possible, or at least talked to in certain types of ways. So what's the context, however? What are the 3 points that I wanted to go over with you? Number 1, you should very rarely have to chew tenants' heads off. Number 2, in defense, maybe you have to do it. And number 3, in frustration. So number 1, very rarely, obviously, because you don't want to create liability for yourself. You don't want to, although it's highly unlikely that somebody's going to sue you over essentially getting butt hurt. Like, oh, they talked down to me, I'm going to go cry to my mommy. Like, it's not even a valid case for free speech, right? Like, our amendment doesn't even allow a judge to really go past dismissing it. So if somebody's got their feelings hurt about something, and on top of that, they'll have to spend $5,000 to even start the case with an attorney, even if that attorney wants to even try that, like wants to take that to a civil court system and seriously say, my client is butthurt because of these words that the landlord said. So it's probably not going to go anywhere, but nevertheless, very rarely, out of the example I gave you, 2 out of 400 times, the 400 being the tenants that we've at a minimum had in our portfolio over the years. So keep that in mind. You have some defense there, but don't even put yourself in liability if you could avail yourself not to. In defense, so chewing off tenants in heads off in terms of defense. So one thing that stood out to me in my childhood was I worked at a grocery store in Chicago, and it's called Jewel Osco. It's kind of like the northern version of Kroger's here in the South. And me and the manager, we were throwing out trash in the back alleyway, and this very, let's call it, is unsightly a word, gentleman decided to start approaching us. And the supervisor raised his voice and said, "Hey, don't come near," and was very clear about that. And so sometimes you have to just do that in life. Forget just the landlord-tenant situation. Just create consequences when somebody is acting a fool. In that circumstance, dude was walking up on us in a dark alleyway in like 10 p.m. at night. So you have to create a protection measure to make sure that person doesn't continue proceeding closer to you. There could be something about to go down in that situation. So in defense, it's okay to be clear and speak with authority. And number 3, in frustration. So chewing tenants' heads off in frustration. Sometimes it's appropriate to keep things in your body, but there's also other times where it's just not healthy for you to just hold on to things that somebody else threw on you. Just don't make a pattern of unhealthily spewing out anger. Like, healthily work it out. In a therapy session, I actually gripped my hands and stood up and started pacing back and forth when I had anger about a situation that came up as we were talking through things. Now, I wasn't chewing somebody's head off in that context, but it was healthy. And sometimes chewing somebody's head off is healthy too, because you never know what they've been used to in life. They may have been spoiled for all 50 years of their life, and so they just expect to be entitled to everything. And you're there to wake them up, like, hey, I'm not going to be treated this way. So, here's me roaring so you could learn to not treat people that way. And you could be a part of delivering somebody from a spoiled type behavior. Of course, they may be stubborn. It may take them 20, 30 years for that to click in their head, to wake up. but you could have been a stepping stone in that occurring. You know, uh, like I mentioned, it could just be somebody that got spoiled as a child and they just don't know any better. So keep that in mind too, that you're not necessarily fighting against the surface level issue. You may be dealing with something emotional, uh, spoiled childhood, somebody that in a relationship gave them everything and the world, somebody that is used to causing fear in people. You could be dealing with that. And so you jumping in and just addressing the surface level can also just be ineffective. That's why I also say it's very rare that you even want to do this, because it's not even worth your energy to try to go deeper. Like, it's on them if they want to actually go into therapy and go and do the deep work. You might just be a small inkling of the percentage of that actually changing. So, what are the two examples? Number one, kind of touched on it at the beginning. They were a tenant that we told at the beginning, hey, after we acquire a property, we spend about $5,000 per unit to do important stuff. So, what's important to you? Because this is what we're going to do, and we probably won't do anything else for many years. And so, at that point, they didn't have any priorities, but then a year and a half later, they're calling us about other stuff that is not what we basically they had opportunity to report into when we acquired the property, but now they're trying to say, well, this is important to me and that's important to me. And now they're calling us every month to address these matters when they had the opportunity before. So that sort of kind of weirdly entitled behavior and kind of talking down to my staff in this case is not acceptable. And so I had to address that. And even with me, they tried it too. And at some point, after talking for several minutes in circles, I just had to essentially let it out, right? And just hang up on them. So it was probably a 10-second span of time. But I was clear. They did not call me back. They were okay with the situation. They understood. I mean, they may have not liked it in that moment. I think they even texted me like, hey, don't talk to me that way. But guess who's not calling me back every month anymore? That person. The other tenant where this happened was, again, ironically in the same duplex situation. But this one was a little bit several months later. So they were essentially resistant to rent increases. We were willing to do some of the work, but they were resistant to the rent increases. So they didn't understand basic math. And we were clear with them, like, hey, we're not running a nonprofit here. We have to increase the rents if we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And so they were resistant to that, but they still kept on pleading for these things that were essentially not critical items at all. And so we ended up, through all of that, they stopped paying rent at some point because they felt entitled. And we just essentially evicted them. And so that's another kind of roundabout way for people to hopefully change too. It's just consequences. There's been probably a handful of other times where I just texted people, here's what you're doing. It's unwanted, annoying behavior. And here's the consequences if you continue. So sometimes you don't even have to chew somebody's heads off. You just express the consequences in a very monotone voice, and that's fine too. But to wrap it all up, these situations occur, and be real with yourself about every context in the matter, whether it's a landlord-tenant relationship or a relationship outside of it. You deserve to respect your body and what it's going through. And I hope you have an amazing and blessed weekend here on Friday afternoon. I'll catch y'all later.